What quiet resistance reveals about authority? Hold this point steady as we begin. What disturbs you is not the thing you face, but the way you relate to it. Events arrive without intention. They do not scheme, accuse, or demand. They simply occur. What gives them weight is the judgment you add afterward. This is not comforting, and it is not meant to be. It places responsibility exactly where it belongs. When something is resisted quietly, it is not removed from your life. It is carried. It follows you into thought, posture, and reaction. What you refuse to examine does not disappear. It governs indirectly. It shapes decisions without being questioned. This is how authority is surrendered without notice. Stoic discipline begins here. Not with force. Not with avoidance. But with a clear admission: nothing external has power over your mind unless you grant it assent. The moment you label an impression as unbearable, unfair, or intolerable, you have already agreed to be ruled by it. This is why suppression fails. Pushing something away without examining the judgment beneath it only deepens its influence. The mind remains occupied. Attention remains captured. Resistance becomes attachment in another form. No circumstance needs to change for this to be true. No person needs to behave differently. The work does not happen out there. It happens at the point where you decide what an impression means. This is not a message of blame. It is a statement of ownership. Responsibility cannot be outsourced without cost. And freedom does not begin with relief. It begins with clarity. Notice this carefully, the boundary you keep crossing without noticing. Before discussing effort, authority must be precise. Much of your frustration comes from treating what is not yours as if it were. You attempt to manage outcomes, correct other people, secure approval, or eliminate uncertainty. When these attempts fail, you feel obstructed. But the obstruction is not external. It is created by a mistaken claim of ownership. According to Stoic discipline, very little actually belongs to you. Your judgments belong to you. Your intentions belong to you. Your choices, refusals, and the way you interpret what appears to you, these are yours. Everything else is not. Events unfold. People act according to their own impressions. Results emerge from countless factors beyond your command. Confusion begins when these domains are blended. You may say you understand this distinction, yet your daily reactions suggest otherwise. You become irritated when someone misunderstands you. You feel anxious when plans change. You replay conversations, trying to rewrite them. Each of these responses reveals an assumption that you were entitled to a different external outcome. This is where quiet resistance enters. Instead of openly demanding control, the mind resists internally. It argues with reality. It holds on to how things should have gone. This resistance feels passive, but it is not neutral. It consumes attention. It narrows perception. Over time, it becomes the unseen authority directing your mood and behavior. Consider a simple example. You send a message and receive no reply. The event itself is minimal. The disturbance arises when you add a judgment, disrespect, rejection, urgency. None of these are facts. They are interpretations. Yet once accepted, they govern your state. The mind waits. The body tightens. Your attention is no longer free. Or consider criticism. Words are spoken. Sound reaches your ears. That is all. Disturbance begins only when you decide what those words signify about your worth, your competence, or your standing. The other person's opinion does not belong to you. The meaning you assign to it does. When this boundary is ignored, discipline becomes impossible. You attempt to regulate emotions while continuing to demand control over externals. This creates constant friction. Effort is expended where it has no authority. The result is exhaustion, not freedom. Stoic practice does not ask you to like events. It asks you to see them accurately. What is not yours cannot be commanded. What is yours does not need permission. Judgment is the point of sovereignty. When you protect this boundary, energy returns. Attention stabilizes. Reaction slows. This does not mean passivity. It means precision. You act where action is possible. You refrain where command is absent. You speak when choice allows. You accept when acceptance is required. Nothing more is demanded. Notice how often disturbance coincides with an unspoken claim: this should not be happening. Each time this appears, a boundary has been crossed. Reality has been issued an order it cannot obey. The cost is paid internally. The correction is not dramatic. It is quiet. You return ownership to its proper place. You withdraw judgment from what does not belong to you. You resume responsibility for what does. This distinction is not a theory. It is the foundation of discipline. Without it, effort scatters. With it, effort concentrates. This explains where authority truly lies, but not yet how agreement with disturbance occurs, the moment you stop questioning the impression. Now we look at what actually creates disturbance. What appears to you is not yet a problem. An impression arrives, words spoken, a delay, a look, a silence. This happens automatically. The mind receives impressions the way the eyes receive light. There is no choice involved in their arrival. This is where many people become confused. They believe that because an impression feels immediate, it must also be binding. It is not. Between the impression and your reaction lies a moment that determines everything. The Stoics called this assent. Assent is the agreement you give to an impression's claim. It is the point where you decide, often silently, this is bad, this is threatening, or this must not be tolerated. Only after this agreement does disturbance begin. Impressions themselves do not command your state. They propose. They suggest. They present an interpretation. The mistake is treating these proposals as facts. When you do this, resistance forms instantly. The mind tightens around the judgment. Attention narrows. The body prepares for defense. All of this occurs without reflection, not because it is necessary, but because it has been practiced. Consider criticism. The impression arrives as sound. The judgment follows quickly: insult, injustice, danger. That judgment is not forced. It is accepted. Once accepted, the mind resists. It rehearses responses. It seeks validation. The disturbance feels inevitable, but it was optional at the point of assent. Or consider delay. You are kept waiting. The impression is time passing. The judgment says disrespect, inefficiency, loss. That judgment triggers irritation. The irritation feels justified. Yet nothing in the delay itself required this response. The agreement happened quietly. This is where quiet resistance governs you. Not through force, but through unexamined consent. The mind agrees so quickly that the agreement feels invisible. You believe you are reacting to the event, when in fact you are reacting to your own verdict. Feelings do not contradict this. Emotion can arise without assent. A sensation of surprise, tension, or alertness may appear before thought. This is natural. Stoic discipline does not deny this. What matters is whether you endorse the story that follows. Feeling is not failure. Agreement is the hinge. The practice, then, is not suppression. It is interruption. You learn to pause at the point where the impression asks for your approval. This pause does not require withdrawal from life. It requires attention. A single breath is enough to delay assent. In that breath, you examine the claim being made. Ask only this: is this impression stating a fact, or offering an interpretation? Almost always, it is the latter. Once seen clearly, its authority weakens. You may still act. You may still speak. But you do so deliberately, not compulsively. This is why resistance persists when ignored. Unquestioned assent becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. You begin to say, "This is just how I am," when in truth it is how you have repeatedly agreed. What governs you now was trained by neglect. The correction is simple, but it is not easy. You stop rushing to judgment. You allow impressions to remain provisional. You do not grant them the power to define reality on arrival. Over time, the pause lengthens. Reaction slows. Choice returns. Nothing external needs to change for this to work. Others may continue as before. Circumstances may remain inconvenient. What changes is the point of agreement. Authority shifts back to where it belongs. Understanding this mechanism does not create discipline. It only reveals where discipline must be applied, why discipline depends on training, not pressure. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They imagine discipline as force applied in moments of weakness. They believe it appears only when emotion is strong and must overpower it. This belief ensures failure. Force works briefly, then collapses. Pressure creates resistance. Resistance strengthens what it tries to suppress. Stoic discipline is not an act of will in crisis. It is training conducted before pressure arrives. It is the quiet repetition of correct judgment when nothing dramatic is happening. What you practice in calm conditions determines how you respond under strain. The mind learns the way the body learns. Not through instruction alone, but through repetition. If you repeatedly agree with impressions without examination, the mind becomes quick to assent. If you repeatedly pause, even briefly, the pause becomes natural. This is not moral strength. It is conditioning. This reframes effort. You are not trying to defeat emotion. You are training attention. You are teaching the mind to recognize the moment before agreement and to remain there long enough to choose. Discipline is not endurance. It is familiarity with that moment. Many people attempt discipline only when disturbed. They wait for anger, anxiety, or frustration, then try to control it. By then, the agreement has already been made. The mind is already committed. Trying to reverse it feels exhausting because it is. Training must occur earlier. Consider how habits form. A repeated action becomes automatic not because it is correct, but because it is familiar. The same applies to judgment. If you habitually interpret delay as disrespect, the judgment arises instantly. If you habitually interpret inconvenience as unbearable, resistance appears immediately. Discipline retrains these defaults. This training is subtle. It happens when nothing is at stake. You notice a minor irritation and do not elaborate it. You feel a small urge to complain and choose silence. You experience a fleeting worry and let it pass without endorsement. These moments seem insignificant. They are decisive. Force demands results. Training accepts gradual change. This is why Stoic discipline appears unimpressive from the outside. There is no dramatic confrontation. No visible struggle. The work happens internally, repeatedly, without audience. It is also why discipline feels lighter over time. As the mind becomes accustomed to withholding assent, fewer impressions demand resistance. Disturbance decreases not because life improves, but because fewer judgments are made absolute. Emotional intensity softens because it is no longer fed. This does not eliminate feeling. Sensations still arise. Preferences remain. The difference is that emotion no longer dictates meaning. You feel without surrendering authority. You experience without obeying. Training also removes the need for self-criticism. When a reaction occurs, you do not condemn yourself. Condemnation is another judgment, another agreement. Instead, you observe the sequence. Impression. Assent. Reaction. You note where training was absent. You resume practice without drama. This approach requires patience. Habits formed over years do not dissolve instantly. But patience is not passive. Each correct pause reinforces the new pattern. Each withheld judgment weakens the old one. Discipline, then, is not harshness toward yourself. It is consistency. It is the refusal to abandon attention. It is returning, again and again, to the point of choice. When this training becomes regular, it stops feeling like effort. It feels like clarity. Reaction slows. Space appears. Authority stabilizes. Training remains abstract unless it enters daily life. How ordinary moments become the test. This practice is proven in ordinary moments. Discipline does not announce itself. It appears in what you are tempted to dismiss as insignificant. Small delays. Mild criticism. Repeated inconveniences. These are not obstacles to practice. They are the practice. Begin with anticipation, but not anxiety. You know the day will include interruption, misunderstanding, and friction. This is not pessimism. It is accuracy. When you expect smooth passage, every deviation feels like a violation. When you expect friction, its arrival carries less authority. You are not surprised, and therefore less likely to agree that something has gone wrong. This anticipation is quiet. You do not rehearse arguments or imagine failure. You simply remind yourself that impressions will arrive. They always do. This prepares the mind to meet them without haste. The second practice is the pause before assent. When an impression arises, do not rush to interpretation. A single breath is sufficient. In that breath, you do nothing heroic. You simply refrain from concluding. You allow the impression to remain an impression. This pause is not withdrawal. You still act when action is required. You still respond when response is appropriate. The difference is that action follows choice, not reflex. The pause creates space. In that space, you decide whether the impression deserves agreement. This is most effective in moments that seem too small to matter. Someone interrupts you. You misplace an object. A plan shifts unexpectedly. These moments train the same mechanism as larger disturbances. Each time you pause, you reinforce the habit of sovereignty. The third practice occurs at the end of the day. Review without praise or blame. You look back and observe where assent was withheld and where it was given too quickly. You do not condemn. Condemnation is itself an unexamined judgment. You do not congratulate. Pride also distorts clarity. You simply note patterns. Where did the mind rush? Where did it pause? What impressions repeatedly claimed authority? This review is factual, not moral. It is data for training. If guilt arises, observe it as another impression. Guilt claims that something bad has occurred and must be punished. This adds a second layer of judgment. You return instead to responsibility. Training was incomplete. That is all. Tomorrow offers another repetition. These practices do not require extra time. They do not require withdrawal from obligation. They operate within the day as it already exists. Their effectiveness comes from consistency, not intensity. Many abandon practice because it feels unrewarding. There is no immediate relief. No dramatic shift. This expectation is itself a judgment. Freedom does not arrive as a feeling. It emerges as stability. You notice it only when disturbances that once governed you no longer do. As these practices continue, resistance weakens. Not because you fight it, but because you stop feeding it with agreement. What once demanded attention becomes optional. What once governed quietly loses its claim. Discipline becomes ordinary. Reaction becomes slower. Authority remains where it belongs. When this practice stabilizes, a different understanding of freedom becomes possible. What remains free when circumstances do not? Freedom is often misunderstood. Many imagine freedom as ease. The absence of pressure. The removal of difficulty. By this definition, freedom depends entirely on conditions. When conditions shift, freedom vanishes. This is not freedom. It is comfort, and comfort is fragile. Stoic freedom is different. It does not promise relief from events. It secures authority over response. Life does not become smoother. People do not become reasonable. Outcomes do not align themselves with preference. What changes is where command resides. When judgment is trained, authority returns inward. You no longer require circumstances to cooperate in order to remain steady. You do not need approval to maintain composure. You do not need success to justify yourself. This is not indifference. It is independence. Inner freedom appears when resistance no longer dictates behavior. You still notice difficulty. You still prefer certain outcomes. But preference does not harden into demand. When demand dissolves, resistance weakens. What once governed quietly loses its leverage. This freedom is maintained, not achieved. It is not a permanent state secured once and for all. Each impression still asks for assent. Each day presents new material. Freedom persists only as long as attention is sustained. This is not discouraging. It is accurate. Nothing external can remove this freedom. Loss, delay, criticism, uncertainty, none of these touch judgment unless invited. They may press. They may inconvenience. They may wound the body or reputation. But authority over meaning remains intact. This is why Stoic freedom does not require optimism. You do not tell yourself that things will work out. You tell yourself the truth: whatever happens, your judgment remains yours. This is enough. Consider how this alters endurance. When resistance governs, endurance feels heavy. You tolerate life while arguing with it internally. When authority is reclaimed, endurance feels lighter. You still carry weight, but without complaint. Energy once spent resisting becomes available for action. This does not make you passive. You still pursue what is reasonable. You still correct what can be corrected. You still refuse what must be refused. The difference is that action is chosen, not extracted by irritation or fear. Freedom also clarifies loss. When something external is taken, a role, a relationship, an opportunity, you experience the absence. You do not deny it. But you do not collapse into it either. Meaning is not taken with the object. Authority remains. This is not emotional numbness. Emotion may arise fully. Sadness, disappointment, frustration, these are impressions and sensations. They pass through without seizing command. You feel without surrendering governance. The paradox is that this freedom feels quiet. There is no surge of empowerment. No dramatic release. Instead, there is steadiness. Fewer internal arguments. Less urgency. More space between impression and response. This is why it is often overlooked. Those who seek freedom through control of externals never find it. Those who secure judgment rarely announce it. Their life may look ordinary. Internally, it is governed. Nothing outside you must change for this to begin. No preparation is required. No permission is needed. The only requirement is that you stop granting authority where it does not belong. This brings us to the final responsibility, where responsibility is no longer deferred. Nothing here requires escalation. What governs you is not what you face, but what you refuse to examine. Quiet resistance does not protect you. It delegates authority to what you avoid. When judgment is left unattended, it does not remain neutral. It decides in the background. This is the cost of neglect. The Stoic position is simple and uncompromising. Responsibility cannot be transferred. No circumstance can be blamed without consequence. No person can be credited or accused for what happens inside your judgment. This is not harsh. It is precise. You are not responsible for the impressions that arrive. You are responsible for whether you agree with them. This responsibility does not end on difficult days. It does not pause for fatigue or disappointment. It remains constant because it is yours. Imperfection does not invalidate this. You will still react. You will still notice moments where assent was given too quickly. This is not failure. It is information. The practice resumes immediately, without punishment or excuse. There is no final victory here. No permanent state. There is only maintenance. Attention must be renewed. Authority must be reclaimed repeatedly. This is not discouraging. It is honest. What you gain is not comfort. It is sovereignty. Fewer internal arguments. Less hidden resistance. More direct engagement with what is actually happening. The world remains unpredictable. You do not need it to be otherwise. The work is quiet. It rarely announces itself. Others may not notice it at all. But internally, governance has shifted. You are no longer ruled by what you refuse to face. Return to what is yours.